Hi, welcome back for True Colors audiobook. This is chapter 26. In the last episode, Michael gave Cassie the best Christmas present ever. He gave her back her cousin Erik, long thought to be dead. What a reunion that was. So let's get right back there and join them and Michael as they continue to fill in the gaps of how all of this came about and the impact it has had on them.
True Colors, Chapter 26. Michael returned as promised the next day and received a warm welcome, a hearty handshake from Erik, a prolonged hug from me. We three walked together to the grassy spot that seemed always to call when conversation was at hand. "Michael, you didn't have to do this at such a high cost," I told him. He glanced at Erik, whose even expression was unapologetic. Just knowing he was alive and well would have been enough. I wanted you to have him with you. You have precious little else. And it was worth 10 times that much for the pleasure of looking on as you turned and finally recognized him. But how on earth did you find him? What made you even try? Yeah, Erik said. If you thought I was dead. Hearing about Greg made me wonder all over again what had truly happened to you. I remembered Cassie telling me you were shot but only presumed dead. That's why you acted suddenly pensive in my cabin that day the news about Greg arrived. He nodded. I figured it was a long shot, but worth looking into. Captives from Manassas were shipped south, so I began searching the records in the hospitals and prisons around Richmond. Finally, at Liggins, there it was. Jonathan, Erik, private. 27th Pennsylvania, wounded and captured outside Centerville, Virginia, 21 July, 1861. We'll never be able to thank you enough, Colonel. Trust that you already have. And please, make it Michael, or just Mike. So soon? I said. You two have known each other less than a day. Whatever happened to propriety? Michael responded with a humorless cock of his head. "Excuse me, am I missing something here?" Erik asked. "Your cousin is just being her usual sassy self," Michael replied, then said to me, "You know it isn't the same as with you and St. John." "Who's St. John?" "The camp's chief surgeon," I said, "and my friend." Erik looked from Michael to me. "Do I sense a bit of strain here?" He put his arms around both our shoulders and walked between us, pulling us along. "Say, Mike, did Cassie tell you I'm about to become an uncle?" He talked on about his nephew, for Hannah's baby was sure to be a boy, and how he'd be running along the sandy beaches, brown as one of the natives, speaking their tongue, winning the hearts of the Hawaiian people as Carl and Hannah worked at winning their souls. His monologue served to ease the tension. We sat down on the dry grass. I rewrapped my wool coat about me against the chill. I sure could go for a cup of hot cocoa just about now. And a fireplace to stare into as we drink, Erik added. A bearskin rug spread in front of it, Michael said, completing the reverie. As bad as this place may seem, Erik said, it's like paradise to me. Paradise? I asked. I'm grateful just to be able to walk outside, to smell occasional fresh air, to see sky above me. Where I've been, the smell of air that didn't gag you at every breath, and the sight of a blue sky blanketing the earth were just distant memories. His eyes lost their sparkle, and he stared blankly at the wooden wall of the stockade. Paradise, because I've been to hell and back. I reached out a supportive hand, but he leapt up and walked away. "Erik!" I rose and went after him. "What's going on?" Ignoring my call, he strode from us with an unbroken gait. "Erik?" He turned and walked steadily backwards, yelling at Michael. "Why did you bring me here?" "What is wrong with you?" I cried. Michael streamed past me and caught up to him. "Come, Erik." He laid a gentle but constraining hand on his shoulder and led him to my cabin. My cousin put up little resistance. Once inside, he virtually collapsed on the cot and sat staring into the cold, empty fireplace. Only moments before he envisioned staring into a fire, but that was a fantasy filled with warmth and coziness and lots of family love. Now his expression reflected desolation. I started to ask that he explain himself, but Michael touched my arm and shook his head. We waited in silent support until Erik began on his own. On our way to Washington, Greg and I spoke of the possibility of being captured. In case we got separated, we vowed to each other that we'd follow certain standards no matter how bad things got. I mean, nothing would ever keep us from rushing to the aid of a comrade, or make us ask for anything from a Reb. But as the months went by, I heard myself asking, manipulating, begging for food, for blankets. I ate things I swore I'd never eat. Worst of all, I grew numb to the never-ending cries of my suffering comrades, sometimes even pulling that Confederate blanket over my head to shut out the sight of them. I despised myself for letting it happen to me, after vowing to Greg. I watched helplessly as he passed sentence on himself, his face contorting in agony. Stepping to the cot, Michael placed a hand on Erik's neck and sat down next to him. I'm not going to pretend I know what you've been through. One thing I do know is that resolutions made in a time of ease often don't hold up when encompassed by crushing hardship. Erik lifted moist eyes and looked long into Michael's. Bereft of strength, he fell against Michael's shoulder and wept. Michael wrapped his arms around him, his empathy absorbing Erik's guilt as the gray uniform absorbed his tears. I moved to kneel next to them and placed my hand on Erik's knee. No one knows like I do how eyes and ears continually assaulted by scenes of affliction can begin to lose their shock over them. It doesn't mean we don't care. And I, too, know all about promises spoken in times of ease. I was still haunted by my unachievable promises to snatch Jem from the hands of a slave owner and the amputee from his pallet of languor. As Erik regained his composure, Michael said, I speak from experience too, you know. Would you believe that I once resolved to not court your sassy cousin? Erik released a chuckle. During the silent moments that followed, as tears were dried and emotions recovered, I perceived a powerful bond forming between these two men I loved. To our delight, Erik's request to be assigned to work detail in the infirmary was granted. Each opportunity to be with him, after having believed him dead for so long, was an occasion to rejoice. It was heartening to see his pale skin pink up with exposure to the sun and fresh air. He gained a bit of weight back, although our portions were becoming meager. He found the food to be more palatable here, which was unbelievable to me. Michael did his best to include extra food for Erik in his weekly box of provisions, but foodstuff in the city was also becoming limited and exorbitantly priced. After oversleeping one morning, I rushed into the medroom and began to gather items for dressing changes. Hurry, Sassy, the doc's already on the ward. Tell Bruce I'll be right there. It's okay, Erik, came a wonderfully familiar voice from the doorway. Anyone can clearly see how desperately she requires her beauty sleep. A smile formed on my face before I even turned around, then broadened as I took sight of him. Justin. He returned a bright smile. Hello, Sassy. I held in check much of the joy I longed to express over his return. Many pairs of eyes were on us, and although the men respected Justin's skills as a physician and regarded him as an honorable man, they never forgot, as I almost always did, that he was a Confederate officer and a slave owner. I hurled a steady stream of questions as we changed blood-clotted rag dressings. Yes, his family was well. Atlanta was lovely, the weather fine. Yes, he had shipped a whole case of medical books. He'd bring some tomorrow. Yes, he had exchanged many Christmas presents. His favorite? A white stallion from his father. It pained him to leave it behind. He didn't want to take it to the battlefront when his transfer orders came through. As the afternoon wore on, one of our critically ill patients who had had 3 abdominal surgeries showed symptoms of a mounting fever and a distended and firm abdomen. He was slipping into unconsciousness. Additional drainage was required, and the prognosis was grim. Under Justin's guidance, I made a small incision into the patient's abdomen, inserted a cannula, ran a trocar through it, and withdrew brown fluid, a very bad sign. "I'm not a betting man," Justin said, "but I'd be willing to wager that anastomosis Bruce did on him last week just couldn't hold. The only way we'll know for sure is to reopen. Are you up to it?" I nodded. Justin's deft hands were quick but delicate. I could barely pass the bisturies and tenotomy knives fast enough before he was inside the patient and ready to explore. Further dissection was slow and tedious due to inflammation and adhesions, but the problem was soon exposed. "There it is." With a tenaculum, he pointed to where the parts of sewn bowel were leaking into the retroperitoneum. It was a good effort on Bruce's part, but the tissue was just too friable to hold the ligatures. We studied the grossly contaminated wound, both of us realizing the patient's condition, which had been poor at the start, was inevitably fatal. Justin asked, "Do you want to close?" I had never sutured such a major incision. My movements were cumbersome in contrast to Justin's fine skills, but he was patient and gave me valuable instructions as I sewed the wound together by layers. The soldier never regained consciousness and died the next morning. Michael arrived in camp later that afternoon and met me in the infirmary. "Do you have some time to spare?" "Just a couple of minutes. We're really busy." We walked a short distance behind the hospital, Michael studying my form with concern. "You're losing more weight." "I'm fine." I really wished he'd stop staring into my thinning cheeks. "I've come with news of the investigation into Sergeant Ragin's death." He didn't continue right away. I struggled to hold inside the urgency I felt for him to get on with the explanation. "As you know, his body was exhumed. The evidence against the 7 guards was sufficient to bring them to court-martial, but something happened. The proceedings were suspended by an adjutant general, and the men were assigned to combat regiments. Something about the army can't spare 7 men when the war is going so badly." I stared in disbelief. "I can't explain it, except to say that somebody's got some real good connections with the powers that be." Powers that be. "And there was no evidence against Sergeant Powers other than your statement. Cassie, with all that went on that day, the horror of it all, you must have been mistaken about seeing him." None of Powers' threats was idle. He could do anything, including ordaining the release of himself and 7 murderers. I was sure he could carry out his threats against Michael. I suppose I was. He placed his hands on my shoulders. "It's a sorry state of affairs, I grant you that, but it's over, and at least you'll never have to see those 7 guards again. Thank you, Michael, for all you did, in spite of the outcome." At the sound of a door opening, Michael looked past me to the infirmary. His shoulders fell. "He's back." I didn't need to ask of whom he spoke. "So that's why you only have a couple of minutes." "Cassie," Justin said as he approached, "I truly hate to break this up, but you were right about Davenport's symptoms of rising intracranial pressure. I laud your diagnostic skills. And now I need your help drilling some trephine holes." "Get one of the stewards to help," Michael insisted. "I need her expertise. It's a delicate maneuver." "I'm sure all of your maneuvers are delicate." Justin grinned, then returned to the ward. Michael stepped away from me, obviously annoyed. "Why does he need your help to drill holes?" Because he's drilling them into a man's skull. His face screwed up. How barbaric! It relieves the pressure on the brain and hopefully will save the man's vision and even his life. He looked upon me with weakening resolve. I guess I can't very well compete for your time against someone like that now, can I? Was he referring to the patient or the doctor? Erik, bring the slop bucket over here, will you? I dumped soiled sponges too worn to be reused into the receptacle that already reeked of infected linen and blood. Moving on to the next patient, I tended a fellow Pennsylvanian, a soldier who had been wounded at Chickamauga, the same battle in which Gregg was killed. His injury had been minor, but like many such wounds, months of unsanitary conditions had bred an infection that had nearly led to an amputation. "It's getting better, ain't it, Miss Cassie? Thanks to them maggots you put on it to eat away the infection." "I believe you're one of the fortunate ones, Corporal. And I heard about how you received this wound. You're a real battlefield hero." "Me and the others just watched our CO be a hero, and we followed." "It's nice that you speak kindly of your commanding officer. Not all the men do." "Not all got reason to. Mine, Colonel Thomas Rose, got captured too, and last we heard he was sent to that officers' prison in Richmond. Wonder if he's faring any better than the rest of us." "You just concentrate on getting your own self well." I gathered my supplies and started for the medicine room as the soldier in the next cot picked up the conversation. "My CO's in that Libby prison too. I read in some northern papers that it's a pretty foul place." I met Erik in the med room. "You 'bout ready to call it a day, Sassy?" "Not 'bout ready. Ready." Justin stopped at the door, reached in and removed his coat from the hook. "Guess I'll see you folks tomorrow. You need anything, Cassie? More books, maybe?" "I've been too tired to get through the ones you gave me last week." I glanced past him to the ward. I had a sense of, I couldn't say, like I was forgetting something. I scanned the rows of patients, trying to bring it to mind. "How's that toothache? Did that new toothbrush I brought you help at all?" My eyes came to rest on the soldiers I had tended last. "Cassie, are you okay?" "What? What did you say?" "Are you all right?" "Of course." "Can you answer my question, then?" "Which question?" "How's your tooth, and does the new brush help?" My mind whirled. Actually, I think I may just take you up on your offer to arrange for me to see your friend in Richmond after all." Erik spoke up. "But you told me the other day—" "I told you I wanted no part of a Southern dental surgeon or a trip to the capital of the Confederacy. But I don't want to lose a tooth over it." I turned from my cousin. "Justin, do you think you can convince the new commandant to let me go with you?" "I already cleared it with him. I've just been waiting for you to agree to go." I accepted that news with trepidation, not at all sure what I was getting into. "I'll speak with my friend tonight and see if he can examine you tomorrow. No sense putting it off. And Cassie, stop looking so worried. It's just a trip to the dental surgeon, not the executioner." He brushed my chin with his finger and departed. I let out a breath and leaned against the counter, knocking over some bottles that were fortunately corked tightly. "Sassy, what is with you? You told me your toothache was getting better." Regaining my nerves, I took his arm and whispered, "Come to my cabin, Erik. I have something to show you."
Survivor's guilt is a real thing, and Erik clearly was not immune to it. And it looks like the first puzzle pieces of that mysterious cipher disk that she found in the sawdust may be falling into place. Will Cassie involve herself now in the thing she abhors? Espionage? Join her in the next episode as she reasons her way through what little evidence she has to go on, and the resistance that she meets in the process. Where will this take her? I hope that you'll subscribe to the channel and like these videos as you go. and share them with anyone that you know loves historical drama, Americana, historical romance, and just general adventure and romance. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.